Welcome to the Nonprofit Exchange. Stories by leaders for leaders to help you to raise the bar on your own performance and to release the potential inside of you. Now, here's today's episode. Greetings, everyone. This is Hugh Ballou. We're back for a new episode every week of the Nonprofit Exchange, where we interview people who have done some remarkable things. They have studied, most of us have done things we wish we hadn't, but we've learned from those and we get to share that wisdom as well. But we have a really good guest today, Lisa Anna Parker, who's coming in from Ottawa, Canada. And Lisa is an author and a coach and a consultant, and her topic area is like ours, it's leadership. But Lisa, one of my favorite quotes is from the British conductor-composer Ralph Vaughan Williams. And he is quoted as saying, music did not reveal all of its secrets to just one person. Now, you could change that word music and put leadership. You can put a lot of things there. So I find it fascinating that other people have different perspectives, and we get to share a lot of perspectives. And, it's a composite of a lot of things when we come up to the center that means something to us. So Lisa Anna Parker, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you have this passion for leadership.
Yes. So I'm Lisa Anna Palmer.
Palmer.
Just want to make that sure in case my husband's watching,
That's a case and study. We all, about making mistakes.
No problem. So thank you so much, Hugh, for inviting me on your show. I'm so excited. And since you've asked me, because we met on the C-suite, I was doing some research on some of the approaches you're taking. And I love that you are a conductor and that you use that analogy for leadership, because it's so true. It's how leaders are able to engage people to work together towards a common goal. And there's something that happens that makes us greater than ourselves when we all come into synergy. So a little bit about my background. So I've worked for over 28 years in the field. And I started at the young age of 22. I worked at PricewaterhouseCoopers. It was Coopers and Lybrand at the time. And I had the joy of working on large reengineering projects and as part of the organizational renewal group. So that's where I kind of started my career and began looking at the importance of basically human experiences at work. And my undergrad was in psychology. So that's where it really started in terms of having a passion for understanding what motivates people, what gets people going, and all the different aspects of human emotion. And relating that back to the workplace, what I found was it's a really huge laboratory for how people interact with one another, right? So since then, I went from working within consulting firms, and I wanted to actually try to implement some of the solutions that we were developing, and I wanted to work in human resources. So I went to work at the Royal Canadian Mint, followed by, I stayed there for a few years as an HR officer. And then I went to work at Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. So these are federal employers with the government of Canada. And in 2011, after I had a really interesting career. So I had some really, really great times, excellent leaders. And I also had some difficult times. I had some burnouts. I had difficulty saying no when work was, basically brought my way, and also having to learn to lead others, right? Because I had been a high performer, and all of a sudden, oops, I get promoted to leadership roles and having to bring people together. Right, it's a different kind of experience.
Yeah, I like this whoops thing. We're both wearing Apple earpods today because we got noise in the background. So we want to make sure that we have good audio. So were you at the end of that? I'm sorry. I just was excited about what you were saying.
No, I was just saying, and that's a very common experience in leadership, is that, people are high performers. They're really good at what they do, be it finance, marketing, you name it. And suddenly we get rewarded with promotions into formal leadership roles. And it's a completely new kind of experience that many aren't really exposed to until they actually get, the title of manager or executive. And there's a struggle and a transition that takes place that people are just not prepared for. And I believe that's at the heart of a lot of the toxicity we're seeing in workplaces.
Oh, my word. There's this thing in the military where if your platoon doesn't respect you as a platoon leader, they're likely to shoot you in the back in combat. And I know there's corporate leaders all over that I've experienced that get shot in the back every day, but they don't even know it. So there's this self-awareness thing that's really lacking. So the fact that you said, oh, I'm a leader now, there's a beginning of discovery that there's something we need to learn. And in my short life of 74 3/4 years, I have discovered that one of the most misunderstood words in our language is leadership.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What I was trying to research when I was writing my book, Light a Fire in Their Hearts, The Truth About Leadership. And I mean truth in the terms of like how we live it, not necessarily absolute truth. And so I was trying to find a definition, just like any good author, right? You start with a definition. Couldn't find one single definition other than, leadership is to lead, right? So it's like, that's not helpful. And then I found that there was a study done, and they found that there were 91 different factors of leadership. I said, no wonder it's so difficult to describe. So I believe that leadership is one of those concepts, just like love and energy, that we really need to understand what it means for us, what it means for the people around us, and how we want to interact with that energy of leadership.
That's a really good explanation. I'm going to send a note here because we got a class that's a communications class that's trying to tap in, and I just got to notice they're on the wrong link. So I see behind you, they're on Zoom, but they're in the wrong Zoom. I see behind you a book. So talk about that book. And I did a landing page, and if you go to the nonprofitexchange.org, you'll find this current episode of the Nonprofit Exchange. And I've got the picture of your book. It's about this fire thing. Isn't that dangerous, setting a fire?
Yeah, here, I'll show you a close-up of the flame. There you go.
Yes, ma'am.
So light a fire in their hearts, the truth about leadership. Well, it depends, right? Fire, it depends what you do with it, right? How many times have we heard, I know I heard it lots of times when I was working in human resources, and also as I was becoming a formal leader in different situations. The old adage, in order to motivate people, you need to light a fire under where? Kind of know where we're told to light those fires. And in years of observation and in working with leaders at all levels, from frontline all the way to CEOs, and also counseling employees who are coming to me with their challenges, what I learned is that really what we need to do is learn to light a fire in people's hearts, right? To create that burning desire to want to do good things at work and to do, and to treat each other and connect at the human level. So that's what, lighting a fire in their hearts means, is really to be able to help unleash people's potential by igniting their engagement, by igniting their desire to want to be and do their best at work and otherwise.
I started conducting a long time ago. It was 18, and I was nothing but potential. Now, I had studied music theory, I had studied piano, so I knew the rubrics of music, not anything about choral conducting, though. So I started directing a choir. But I focused and I learned that, but I look back on some of those probably embarrassing times. I didn't know any better. But there is this thing of recognizing potential. And I think, and I guess people think that some people who are bossy are leaders, when we aren't really born as leaders, are we?
Well, here's an interesting thing. So there's an author here in Canada. Her name is Françoise Morissette, and she wrote a book called Made in Canada Leadership. And she went into the whole aspect of innate versus accidental leader. So innate are the typical behaviors that we assign to someone who maybe on the playground, they're telling everybody what to do, and people are saying, oh, they're born or natural leaders, versus accidental leaders, which are people who, step up when they feel the strong desire to, address a certain situation, or standing up for the cause or whatnot. I'm sure because you work with clergy and also with nonprofits, people who really step up because they believe in something is something very common and important, right? So when I was looking at those two concepts, innate versus accidental leader, is that some of us might be born with certain tendencies to gather people around and get them to really work towards our objective or our vision. However, there's growth opportunities for both. Right? So you take your innate leader, for example. Innate leaders tend to be a little bit more extroverted, right? So they're the ones who are kind of stepping up into the limelight and whatnot. So what about listening? What about being thoughtful, right? Those are growth areas for people who are considered quote unquote innate leaders. So there's a growth that needs to happen for them. At the same time, the accidental leader tends to be a little bit more introverted, right? So what they need to do is, perhaps they're already good listeners and thoughtful and are helping others to shine, but they need to start to learn to step up and help share the spotlights, because sometimes people look to you for guidance, right? So you need to be upfront. So it's interesting to me that these concepts we've created around leadership really need to converge, because someone who is a great people leader, to me, is someone who kind of has grown, be they innate, have grown more of the accidental leadership type qualities, like learning to listen, learning to share the spotlight, give recognition to others, and somebody who's more accidental leader, learning to step up and have the courage to get out of their comfort zone.
Yay. According to the statistics, this is old stuff, the Myers-Briggs people, you mentioned clergy, and I do work some with clergy. It's the minority of who I work with, but certainly there's a need for leadership potential there. There's a potential for growth there, I should say. 75% of clergy identify as introverts. And I would guess church musicians, the large majority of them would also identify as introverts, which doesn't say you're shy or not. It says that's how you generate your energy. And I'm an extrovert. I'm out there and I get my energy from interfacing with people. So let's unpack some of these. That's fascinating. So I do agree with you that I don't disagree at all with anything. The fire, the passion, the purpose, the focus. Let me give you our 4 points, Hugh Ballou's 4 points of leadership. Let you respond to them in your words. So I have these four principles of leadership that we teach in Center Vision Leadership Foundation. And from a conductor standpoint, I'm going to change my background just for fun, because you've brought up the conductor thing, and here I am. And to me, that's a powerful leadership model, because we can't make anybody do anything. We can't bark and tell people. We pull out of people and we create the space for people to use their own abilities. So with that, so let me just give it briefly and you respond, and then we'll get to some real questions. But the first one, I'm on the podium. I'm ready to go. Say it's rehearsal. This is a meeting, by the way. I got to know the score. I got to know exactly where I'm going. I have to be very clear about expressing it, and I have to have the skill to express it. So I call that foundation. That was number one, foundations. So let me give you a one by one. Respond to, you just talked a little bit, I triggered this line of questioning. I triggered the being very clear on where you want to go. Talk about that, Sam.
Yeah, so having the vision, being clear, absolutely. And also engaging others in it, right? Having recognition, and particularly, overlaying it to what's going on today. People, organizations are struggling, trying to figure out how to bring people back into the workplace, or what's that's going to look like. No one knows. And one of the first questions I have for leaders is, have you asked your team? Right?
Good question. Good question.
Right? So it's important to hold that vision. And I heard, I can't recall their name, but somebody was talking about being a chief vision officer, right? Because you need to create that vision.
Yeah.
And then to inspire others to see it, and then also make it their own, and being open and having that open spirit to the fact that others want to contribute to that and are inspired by it. So let's create something that together, and that's what I love about, the fact that you're a conductor and seeing that beautiful orchestra. They're looking at you for the vision, that foundational piece, and then they're bringing themselves into it. So it becomes this beautiful shared piece of music.
Love it. Love it. And you notice on my music stand, there's a piece of music, which is it's actually the equivalent of a strategic plan. People now, it's an engagement tool. We know where to go. So that's all part of foundation, is direction and process. So number two is when I hire a contract orchestra, I hire the best. So the first one's know the score, second one's hire the best. It's about relationships. Why are relationships important in leadership?
Oh, wow. Relationships are so important. I think the best leaders know how to connect at the human level, to really go beyond and transcend, this external face we all put forward, is how to get past that, how to connect with the human being that's behind it and see that potential, and also to help unleash it. And unless you create a safe space within a safe relationship where it's not based on fear, but it's based on mutual respect, on caring, I would say love, the agape love that we have for one another, on compassion. Unless we are able to create that space, then people were not going to bring their best. They're going to hold back because they're not going to be vulnerable. They're going to hold back and not put their all into it. Whereas when we're leaders who care and who really want to connect at the human level and unleash potential, then we work at creating that safe space where people feel like they're in a relationship that's mutually beneficial, where people feel comfortable and they're able to take little risks and be able to be the best selves and take that risk. And maybe if it doesn't work out, guess what? You're creating a safe space. They'll learn from it. You're going to support them and you're going to help them take it to the next level. So attracting the best to me is, people with high potential, but who are also heart inspired.
Love it. Love it. James Allen wrote that little book, As a Man Thinketh, and he says, we don't attract what we need, we attract what we are. And you just echoed that. So I just had this conversation with my wife on the balcony an hour ago. Were you listening?
Listen, I promise.
So you mentioned earlier, now this is one thing that I put front and center as a conductor, is the listening skills. One of the most underutilized skills that a leader employs or needs to employ or should employ. There's a quote that I can't trace down, it must be anonymous, that says, listening is so close to loving, you can hardly tell the difference. So there's a relationship piece of listening, but there's a clarity. You pointed out a lot of dynamics. So you want to say more about listening and why it's so important?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Listening is key. I think it's the most important and most difficult leadership skill. And it's lifelong learning to listen, right? Because listening is not just about being present, hearing what the person says, but it's actually working on ourselves to be able to be present instead of having our mind wander or trying to guess what we're going to say next or whatnot. Is to actually hold that space and create that space for that person to be themselves and be vulnerable. And actually, a fun story. I'm sure you're familiar with Sir Richard Branson, and he was at a conference here in Ottawa. And I asked him a question. I was in the audience, and I really liked his focus on people that he has for his group of companies. And I asked him, what would you advise new entrepreneurs who are trying to grow their companies to make sure that people stay passionate about their work? And he said, you got to listen, 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 listen. That was his response. And in fact, I love what came next. He says, you got to listen. You got to, act on what you're hearing. If there's things that you can't, then you explain, you give rationale, and then you look for the best in people, right? So listening helps you to hear and see the best in people.
Now, how does that go with, earlier you talked about trust and creating a safe culture. and allowing vulnerability. And Brene Brown writes books and speaks on vulnerability. So where does this vulnerability come in? And it's not whining, it's not complaining.
No.
So how does vulnerability show up in leadership, and why is that so important?
Yeah, absolutely. So part of the approach in my book, in the Light Your Leadership approach, is that great leaders connect at the human level through compassion, courage, and competence. And we can add creativity to that. So that courage piece is actually really interesting when we look at vulnerability, because being vulnerable is the scariest thing on earth. And I know this for a fact because I've worked with so many managers and leaders being, on one-on-one meetings, which are different than when you look at, have those meetings in the boardroom, one-on-one meetings. And some of the things that keep them from doing what they need to do to be great leaders is that fear of exposing their vulnerabilities and to be seen as weak. Whereas really, when you are able to show your humanity and to share it in a professional, authentic manner, you actually give permission to others to do the same. And that's when you get to the truth. That's when you're dealing with truth. You're not dealing with people's personas. You're not dealing with the masks that they're wearing. You're dealing with actual human connection that is so necessary for high performance. And so having the courage to be vulnerable means I have the courage to be myself and not have to pretend I'm like this superhuman robot who walks around with this mask of so-called professionalism. So to me, professionalism is being able to be our very best, to respect others and create civility and inclusion.
It's authenticity, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. That's really super. Thank you for this. And then, so I've got the first pillar is the foundation. Where are you going? Can you do it? Can you lead it? Second one is about relationships. The third one is in music. Rests are important. They're there for a purpose. There's magazines in there. Their rests are important. So it's like, it's about balance. If we're working all the time, we're out of balance. We're worn out. We're no good. We're no good. So I'm trying to get a magazine to show you. So why is balance important? Caring for self, managing all the parts of ourselves, physical, mental, spiritual, etc.
Yeah, I'm so glad, I'm so glad you brought that up, because certainly one of the gaps that we see all the time in working with leaders, and also self-leadership. So self-leadership, I think, is an important part of it. Right? Is we're all leaders. Some of us have formal titles, but we all need to lead in our lives. So we need to make decisions around those things. And I know for sure that I had a huge gap when it came to self-care, because I didn't know how to set boundaries and say no at work. So, I used to joke, I was like, the HR drive-through, all the big files that were complex, nobody else wanted to work on them or needed to be handled at the last minute were dropped onto my office. In my office on my desk, and I would say yes, because I did, I was 33 at the time. I didn't know how to say no, and I thought it was my duty to be able to complete my work. It didn't matter that the mountain kept getting taller and taller, and even though I was delivering, so I thought, okay, I'll get to the end of it. Then what would happen is that another pile would get dumped on me, right? So it's like a never-ending kind of thing. So there's two aspects to it. One is the self-leadership, where we need to learn. And fortunately, I got a coach, because after I burnt out, we're trying to figure out what was going on, and he's like, well, you don't know how to say no. You're saying yes to everything. You don't know how to manage your priorities. You're making everything a number one priority, except for your health. So he taught me how to set those healthy boundaries. And at the same time, if I'm leading others, I need to not only set an example, I need to care enough to notice. So let me notice if I have somebody who's burning out. Let me notice if if I'm assigning too much work, and let me invite them as part of the planning process, so that we're creating reasonable timelines and goals where we're putting people first, instead of trying to create these deadlines which are unreasonable and trying to push everything through the system.
Whoa. You sure you weren't listening to my conversation before? This is quite remarkable.
There's a wavelength thing going.
So the balance makes everything else work. If we don't care for self, we show up burned out.
We burn out, we burn others out, right?
Well, and we're talking to a segment, nonprofit leaders, the burnout rate is almost 50%.
Oh yeah.
And it's higher for clergy. And I think
Oh,
we
wow.
do it to ourselves. Because that thing of delegating, caring from others, building the synergy of the teams, creating a safe place that people can step up and be vulnerable, all of those are important in creating a half-functioning culture. So the fourth principle, which is actually the third, I skipped over because I got distracted, and it's partly my old age and mental condition. But the balance piece is what makes everything else work. It's the rests are in music, they're dramatic, they're not absence of sound. It's a punctuation. So the final one is we rehearse for success. Every musical group, the best ones in the world, rehearse for every performance. Now we got worthy work, we've defined, we've developed our skill to lead this thing. We've got really good people around us. We come to the workplace refreshed and prepared, but we put people into a system where they can't function. Like, for instance, boring, unproductive meetings, the annual review, a lot of these things that are low functioning that we go into as in habit. So how do you see setting up effective systems as engaging the whole culture in what you're talking about in high performance, basically?
Mm-hmm. Well, so I think it comes back to trust, right? So when you have a high trust organization, then leaders are more likely to delegate. If they're not able to delegate, then they'll go back and say, well, why is that? Maybe I need to talk to my people, make sure they're trained. Maybe I need to do my own mindfulness practices. So being able to rehearse for success, I think you need to create the conditions for that. And part of that is also, making sure that you're not just creating, and I was having this conversation last week, echo chambers. Right. So Jody Bach and I were having a little talk. So that's the name of my podcast, Light Your Leadership Talks. And we were saying, you know what? And I think it comes back again to that idea of fear to be vulnerable is I'm going to want everybody to agree with me. So I'm going to create an echo chamber where no one, steps up when maybe things are derailing or need to be flagged or whatnot. So what am I going to do? I'm going to create lots of meetings where I can share this information, make sure others are repeating it back to me, and maybe not having those fundamental relationships in place where people feel comfortable enough to come mention, hey, let me flag this to you or whatnot. So then you have meetings to fix the problems because people didn't want to flag things to you in the first place. So it's this big circle or cycle of processes that are breaking down because there's bottlenecks. And oftentimes those bottlenecks could be removed with trust. Because if we empower people, then they're going to be able to, create good processes. Let's listen to the front lines. So here's listen again, right? Listen to the front lines who are actually doing the work, and not try to impose our perspectives on everybody in the organization by having, cycles and cycles of meetings. Help people to communicate with one another, empower them with the ability to communicate with one another. Don't be the person who says, oh, you can't go talk to that manager, you have to go through me first, right? Don't be the one who prevents people from sharing across teams and to create an us and them kind of culture. So, my view is that too many meetings, I think some meetings are important. So make them meaningful, right? This is where we're sharing values, where we're celebrating people, where we're gathering ideas, where we're brainstorming. And it's a reciprocal kind of situation. It's not just the leader talking, because then they're not really being a leader. They're creating an echo chamber. So the idea is that have meetings that are meaningful, make them interesting and fun and creative so that we leave with a really clear sense of what everybody's going to be doing until the next time we meet, setting the foundation so that people are interacting with each other in between meetings. And then, when we meet again, we're going to do a little status. Does anyone need help? Does anyone have blocks? Does anyone need support? And then your meetings become meaningful, and then they're not just like blah, blah, blah leader imposing whatever credo or doctrine on the people who are attending.
It's not your pulpit to preach. So
thank you.
I'm in your fan club now. You've got a lot of really good sound bites. So we're going to come back and talk about, I want to take a sponsor moment here. We're going to come back and talk about communications and more about relationships and leadership. And then we have some people that have joined us. I'd like you to talk about your book that's behind you and hold it up again, what's behind it. But I want to talk about one of our sponsors that's been a longtime sponsor and a very valuable sponsor is the printer for a nonprofit performance magazine, which I can't hold up because I've got my, I don't have my green screen today. So it's funny how things disappear into the background. So Nonprofit Performance Magazine is a leadership magazine that goes to leaders everywhere. And it's about becoming a better leader and studying what other people have to share, like Lisa Anna Palmer, who's on the show today. And you are invited to certainly, you wanted to ask about it, to have an article about some of the things you're talking about that would be in a subsequent issue of Nonprofit Performance Magazine. So it's published by Center Vision Leadership Foundation, and it's printed by WordSprint. WordSprint is our sponsor because WordSprint is a print house, but they really are a mailing house. And we stay at the top of the mind. It's top of mind marketing, and relationships are important. So we send things to people who have it in their hand, and we tell them what's going on. So if you want to stay in touch with your donor base, your supporters, your sponsors, make sure that you stay in touch and put something in their hand. Bill Gilmer and WordSprint and his team have had 20 years, 2.5 million mailing pieces. They know exactly how this works. Wordsprint.com. Go and check it out, and you get a free consultation, and they'll help you build a strong relationship data system for you and your supporters. So we started out with you showing the book, and there's been some folks that have joined since then. So I want to take a special privilege and ask you to do it again, or a little more about it. What inspired you, and what happened as a result of writing that book? What happened? It's an experience. I've written 10, and it's an experience writing a book, isn't it?
Oh my goodness, is it ever? I thought that writing a book, so this is my first book. So I have a couple of other ones on the way. It's called Light a Fire in Their Hearts, The Truth About Leadership, and it's available at all kinds of online stores. Just pick your favorite one. So what inspired me to write it is, I think it was just experiencing life in HR, in organizational renewal, and transformational leadership for such a long time that when I started my business in 2011, I decided to do HR consulting. But I felt was too broad. So I was getting all kinds of requests for all kinds of work. And really where my heart was coaching, training, developing leaders. And because I found that at the heart of a great deal of suffering in workplaces, there is a lot of suffering in workplaces, that there was always leadership behind it, either a question of self-leadership or, incompetent leadership by others. And to put it nicely, it happens, right? It's no wonder engagement levels are like 15% of engagement, and 85% of people are disengaged globally, right? So then it took me a while to kind of get from being kind of judgy about it to being more compassionate about it and saying, well, look at the way people are promoted, right? They go from being really good, excellent, high performers at whatever they do, and they're rewarded with a promotion, and now they're in charge of a group. So they've spent maybe 5-10 years developing their craft, their profession, and 0 time developing their leadership of others. And we expect them to succeed. So promoting people before they're ready, or before they're even mentored or able to learn more about the art of leadership, the art and the science of leadership, actually can hurt them, and by extension hurt their teams and the organization. So that's one of the key themes of the book, is to prepare leaders and start early. Don't start like the day before you're going to promote them to manager role, right? Start early. So early leadership development. And also understanding the transition of going from, it can be painful, right? So like you said earlier, you need to get the respect of your team. But if you were their colleague on Friday and you come in on Monday and you're their team leader, what happens, right? All of a sudden they're going to put some distance between. And I was coaching managers, and that's one of the most surprising things they experience. They say to me, Lisa, I don't understand, like last Friday I was having nachos and chips with them and beer and all that stuff. And then here comes Monday and nobody wants to talk to me anymore. I'm not one of the guys anymore, right? So understanding that, that leadership growth can be painful. So we need to support our leaders when they make that shift from being individual contributor to formal manager or executive or whatnot. So that's one piece. The other piece that's really fundamental is, what are the messages we are giving to the next generation of leaders, right? When and I know because so I'm their coach, so I hear this, right? Oh, Lisa, today I went to my director and I asked them, what do I need to do in order to be able to advance in the organization? One day I have a dream of becoming a VP. So what do you think the advice was? Rather than saying, well, learn to engage people, take leadership, develop yourself, etc. The advice is, well, in order to, get ahead, you need to learn to play the game. So what is that game? It's not a nice game, right? That they're being advised to play. So I say those are two silent killers in organization, is promoting people without offering them the opportunity to learn about leadership first. And secondly is to, when they come for advice, is to tell them that they need to learn to play games or be mean or look out for number one to get ahead.
Games are so destructive, and they exist in corporate America, in institutions of higher learning, in the church and synagogue. And a lot of times they're invisible because we don't, there's been there so long, we no longer see them.
Right.
And so part of the balance of my 4 principles is having a coach, because leaders need people like you and me, because we do have what are called blind spots. And part of that is being, we see it, but we don't see it. It's invisible, right, in plain sight, sort of thing.
Or we don't name it, right?
Yeah. The elephant in the room.
Yeah. And it's really hurting organizations.
We're deadly polite and we walk around it, and we actually set up unintended consequences, don't we?
Absolutely. It's burning people out. People are suffering because of this. Leaders, their teams. When we tell people that they need to play games, that means don't be yourself. If you're a nice person, so imagine you hire somebody and bring them into your organization because they're a team leader, they're a good person, they have integrity, they're great at what they do. You promote them and all of a sudden you're telling them, well, forget the integrity, you need to play games to get ahead. You need to step on other people's toes and try to orchestrate kind of these ambushes of your colleagues. Come on.
Yeah. In some of the corporate models, I won't mention any, but when you fire the bottom 10%, that's a fear.
Yes.
And people are, that's exactly the dynamic that would set up.
You know what I call that? The school of monstrous management. That's what I call that.
I love it. So I haven't read your book. We just got connected, so my excuse is, and I'll stick with it, didn't have time to even get a copy, but I believe you offer advice modeled after 30 great leaders. So what do they have in common, and how do you extract, what are the essence of best leadership practices today?
Yeah, thank you. So again, I wrote this book. I didn't want it to be kind of academic. I wanted it to be told through stories in workplaces and with leaders. So I interviewed over 30 leaders. And again, what I found they have in common is that ability to connect at the human level. That was number one. That was, I would say the most important piece, because leadership is being able to connect at the human level. Good leadership or great leadership. We won't talk about bad leadership. So to be able to connect at the human level, and then I identified through compassion. So having compassion, which is the empathy plus the desire to help. So it goes a bit further than empathy. It's empathy plus the desire to help, right? And to be able to see when others are going through a certain struggle or that they need help or whatnot. So having that ability to see that and notice and be able to listen, right? And then having courage. So the courage to be vulnerable, the courage to stand up, and the courage to manage upwards. Because what I found was in doing workplace assessments is that people were overworked because their manager didn't have the ability to manage upwards and manage expectations of senior leadership to be able to manage the workload that was coming down. So kind of like my story at the beginning, right? Before I learned how to do it, is I would say yes to everything, except, you know, a lot of times I'd end up doing it myself and burning out. Or what would be the other thing is that you pass it on, right? So having the courage to be able to stand up for what is right and being able to manage expectations and to be able to flag things when they're not reasonable, even if it means taking a bit of a risk.
Absolutely. Yes, go
ahead. And then the third piece is competence, right? So, and that covers pretty much all the different horizontal skills to be able to learn communications, performance management, you know, processes, all those things. So whatever it is that you're working on is that you become good at it and be able to inspire others and encourage them to also continue to grow. It's lifelong learning, right? So those I'd say would be the key things, plus creativity, of course.
Absolutely, absolutely. My when I speak to groups and people are questioning whether they're a leader or not, I say here's Hugh's three simple definitions of a leader. You get things done, you know how things, or figure out how things get done, and you influence people positively.
Right.
You can certainly be a bummer and influence them negatively. So I want to touch on something we've sort of moved around, that the foundation, I believe, for leading is relationships, and we've talked about that and building the trust, but also communication has the same basis of relationship. And I forget who said this, but somebody famous said the biggest illusion about communication is that it actually has taken place. and so, you know, we think we have communicated because we sent an email,
right? And we forget, Hugh, that a major part of communication is what? Listening. We forget that part. It's the most important part.
Yeah, when there's a dialogue,
right?
I think probably what leaders need to get a hold of is that it's not a monologue, and that what you were just talking about earlier about meetings, you know, it's a delivery system for some people when it actually is an engagement tool. And our process is we define as creating a new architecture of engagement, because people have an opinion and they get to voice it and they get to see how it works out inside the group.
Yeah, absolutely. It has to be part of a process that there's more than one person involved to be communication. And then you want to check back and see, what did I say in a certain way that people understand what I was saying? You know, so you need that dialogue. Unless if you're not having a dialogue, how are you going to see if people actually got what you had to say? And number two, are you hearing what they're saying back?
What's the saying? I'm not sure what you thought you said is what I thought I understood.
Right. Check it out.
Would you like to take a few questions?
Absolutely. Yes.
So we have some great young leaders, good, sharp minds with a good professor in Dallas, and they're in class watching you. And I just turned on Bob Hopkins' mic. And Bob, I'm traveling. I don't have your Philanthropy Misunderstood book, but he's a really great teacher of philanthropy and an inspiring leader of young leaders. So Bob, do you have any questions boiling up from the group?
Well, the group is quite kind of silent. We do have one or two here today. We're listening though, and I'm writing down on the board everything you're saying, because I think this is an important topic for everybody to understand. You know, everybody wants to be a leader, and everybody wants your child to be a leader. But how do you do that? How do you do that? And of course, I have circled here: arrive early, dress up, and show up. So anyway, those are the first three things, I suppose, for an introvert. If you want to be recognized, go early and meet the people who are in control. We have a question possibly here. This is Carmen. And I was going to ask you about this. How do international students transfer and get into the communities of America. How do they become leaders in organizations or in groups that really don't represent who they are? And Carmen is one of those people. This is not her first language. This is not her country. It is now. She's married and she has children, and she's actually middle-aged. She's not an 18 and 19-year-old student.
Or Canada, Bob. Our guest is in Canada, so it would apply to Canada as well as the United States.
Absolutely. Oh, I'm so glad. So Carmen is the person who was asking. Carmen, I'm so glad you asked that question. In fact, I work quite a bit with a wonderful nonprofit called World Skills Employment Center. And in particular, we're having an initiative. It's called Empowering Newcomer Women. So we help them to land work here in Canada in this case. But I'm sure a lot of the same, I guess, opportunities would relate to the United States. And a key part of that is we talk about self-leadership, right? So leadership is from the inside out. So we always start with us first and are able then to radiate that outwards to engage others in it. And, some of the things that you and I have been talking about are really key. That leadership is not about necessarily telling others what to do. It's about asking and listening, and then being able to see how we can be of service to others, right? How can we inspire and engage others to be and do their very best? So I think that would be a great place to start, developing your own leadership abilities, doing mindfulness, if you have a faith-based practices or whatnot, really working on yourself in terms of building your compassion, building your courage, building your competence in whatever areas you're in, and then start engaging with people, reach out to them, really connect at the human level. Because when you connect at the human level and you establish that, then, and you have people's ear, is by first listening to them. And really think about leadership as not only guiding, coaching, etc., but as engaging with. So sometimes, we worry about engaging with others because it feels uncomfortable or we have to get out of our comfort zone. So that's certainly an area to work on, is that courage to reach out to others.
Beautiful.
I hope that helps.
I have a question.
Thank you. Thank you.
And go and shine your light.
Yeah, I have one question. All my life, I work as a sales associate. So now I am turned to be a teacher, and I'm working as a Montessori teacher right now. And I had like 20 children with me. And other teachers always tell me, I don't know how to manage those 20 children. Sometimes they make me crazy. And I asked the teacher, how you manage these children? And say, well, the experiences. So what does you suggest for me?
And who's talking? Who is this?
It's Carmen.
Carmen.
Still,
Oh, it's still Carmen. Okay.
yeah.
So Carmen, you're asking how to lead a group of children?
Yes.
Good question. Let me know when you get the answer. But one of the things I can say fundamentally is that children are a great mirror and a reflection of our truth and our humanity. And children want to be seen and heard, just like adults do, except adults hide it better. So when you're able to show children that they're being seen and they're being heard, and that you connect with them and that they feel like they're valued and are important, guess what? They start to calm down. Because really, and this happens in workplaces as well, right? So sometimes you see there's conflict in workplaces, or people are getting upset and are getting louder and louder, especially if you're doing major transitions. It's because people want to be seen and heard and validated. So when we see their humanity at any age, then things start to get better, and then also show them yours.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. My pleasure.
Actually, Lisa, that's a really good laboratory for learning leadership, because if you can do it there, you can probably do it anywhere. Bob,
yes, for sure.
Bob, I'm sorry I interrupted you. You got another one?
Yeah, this is Tori. She has a question.
Hi, Miss Lisa. What
Hi.
advice do you have for a leader that maybe wants to start to write a book, kind of like you have? Where would you advise them to start?
Oh, I love that question. Okay, so if somebody has a desire to write a book, I encourage them to start. Just start. And I mean, Hugh is better. He's written 10, right? So I'm on my second one now, but certainly it's to answer that calling to write that book. I like to think of books as they're souls that are born in a different format. Because I have to tell you, I learned so much just writing my book because of the experiences. So you need to enjoy the journey. So I would ask, first of all, what's inspiring you to write that book? We hear a lot about people writing books because it's their business calling card or whatnot. And that's fair enough. But really, when it's a book that comes from the heart and it's profound, know that you are going to learn from that book. You are going to grow from that experience. And even if you never finish it, which I hope you do, just the gifts that come along the way. And I'll just give you an example, okay? Because when I first started, I've written corporate reports all my life, all my life, since 22, let's say. I'm 50 now, so that's a long time. And, I thought, I'll bang out this book in a year, no problem, because I used to writing long reports, right? It took me 5 years. To write it. And you know what? The first 2 years I was kind of getting mad because I was like, why can't I write this thing faster? And then by the third and fourth year, I said, look at all the blessings that came because I didn't write it faster. I got to meet people. I got to meet Richard Branson, for goodness sake. I got to meet all these 30 leaders that I wouldn't have known, 2 years before. I got to experience new things, new projects through my work. Meeting new people. I got to do this amazing project with Indigenous leaders, so a big part of that is when you're starting to write your book is to trust and have faith. So this is a great place to have the faith. Have faith that it will guide you where you need to go to learn and to experience certain things that you're going to get to share in your book. And to trust that it'll happen in the right time.
Love that answer. Thank you so much for that question. Bob, we got time for one more question. If you got one or somebody has one.
Somebody else has one. I have one too, but I preferred my students be the ones here. This is McKenna.
Hi, I have a question about what are your thoughts about leaders who are having to congregate in underground churches, especially whenever they're going up against the law?
Maybe if you could just give me a little bit more. I think this might be something that's happening in the US.
Well, I know it was actually in your homeland, Canada, but also, overseas, international, like China, especially.
And
what's happening?
Yeah, what's happening with that? I'm not really sure I can comment on that per se, other than to say that from a leadership perspective,
yes,
I believe that people need to do what they feel is right in their hearts and to connect with their truth and be guided by that, and then to make decisions. So make clear decisions. So getting clarity is really important, right? So if I'm trying to make a decision on how I'm going to show up in the world, first I need to have clarity around what it is that I want to put out there. What is it that I'm trying to accomplish and want to create, right? What's the impact I want to make? And then to get clarity on what that means. And then I can make informed decisions about, whether I need to demonstrate courage, whether I need to manage risk, who I need to connect and bring into the movement. And I think that applies to many different situations, especially difficult situations that we're encountering these days, right? So we need to make a decision on when am I going to step up? When am I going to decide that I need to take a different, a different way of doing things? Or when do I need to stop and try to understand more about other people's perspectives? So I think that comes back to that self-leadership piece, is to figure out how you want to show up in the situation.
We got about 5 minutes left. Bob, do you have a short one you want to work in here real quick?
Well, you and I have talked about this before, but I'd like to have This is her opinion about leadership. And philanthropy. To me, a leader can't be one unless they are a community servant, giving back to the community.
Thank you, Bob.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't see any lists of people with words that describe leadership, including compassion or giving back or philanthropy or philanthropic or empathy or any of those words.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad you brought that up. In fact, in addition to the 3 C's of connection, which is compassion, courage, and competence, in the book, you'll also see there's a list of the 8 P's of ignition. And that includes profundity, so going within, getting clear on what's important to you, your passions, your purpose, passion and purpose, perseverance, professionalism, play, philanthropy, and prosperity. So I think those are the 8 P's of ignition that really people can connect with and find meaning in their work, because meaning is really important. And that's what's missing from a lot of jobs or roles, is that people don't understand how they're making an impact, a positive impact, and making a difference in the lives of others.
Thank you, Bob. That's really good as usual. So Lisa, let's just kind of end up here. You've given us a whole bunch of stuff to think about. That you'll find a transcription on the Nonprofit Exchange. You'll find a transcription and all these wonderful sound bites that Lisa has given us today, and all these answers to these, I think, very relevant questions. So we're coming out of a difficult time, we hope, with, you may have heard of this pandemic thing we've had. And I have seen in the last year some leaders stepping up and doing amazing things. And so they're really leading in a much stronger way, and the organizations are stronger. So what's your advice for people in this next era, this next step of how do we enable and empower the organizations we lead?
Great question. So I think number one is, how do you continue to keep that human connection, whether it's virtual or in person? Number two is involve your employees, involve your teams in determining how you're going to go back to work, right? And be inclusive about it, because it doesn't need to be a one size fits all, provided everyone kind of does their best and in good faith are able to set up perhaps a mix of, and that's why we call it hybrid, virtual work with in-person work, and see what work, what can accommodate the various people in the team, all with the focus of, commitment to doing and being their best. So a great leader knows how to go and harvest those ideas and inspire people and engage them in being the best versions that they can be. So that means that there needs to be more focus on that human leadership development piece, that leadership from the inside out, that, working on mindsets, working on what one of my collaborators, Ryan Codfordson, calls vertical leadership, and basically thinking about how we can be of service to others, right? And of others in organizations, as well as our clients and our colleagues.
Outstanding, outstanding. The really aware leaders have figured out what we shouldn't have been doing, and it's been a good time for them to make the adjustments. So in the last minute we got, what's a tip or final thought you'd like to leave people with today?
Well, learn how to light a fire in their hearts, and think about, how do you ignite yourself so that you can ignite others?
Great advice. You'll find more about Lisa Anna Palmer at Light Your Leadership. Just like it sounds, no dots, dashes, lightyourleadership.com. Lisa Anna Palmer, thank you so much for being our guest today.
Thank you so much, Hugh. It's been a pleasure, and I'm so glad we got to meet, and I look forward to chatting again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you again.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for watching the Nonprofit Exchange.